All right. So again, welcome everyone. We appreciate you all joining us this evening. This presentation is an overview, individual support plans. This is taking place as a webinar on May 25th, 2021, and being presented by Ms. Meranda Hess and Ms. Desiree Yeager, both from Northampton and Lehigh counties. So just a quick disclaimer from the ARC of Lehigh and Northampton counties. The ARC of Lehigh and Northampton counties Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any other provided by the ARC's Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply the endorsement, recommendation, or favoring of the providing party or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. All right, so now it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest presenters, Meranda and Desiree. Thank you both for your time this evening. The Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And thanks everybody for coming tonight and giving us your time. Just a little disclaimer, this is the first time that we are presenting on this topic, so it might be a little rusty, so I apologize. You're kind of our test audience for this. And I invite anybody to just pop a question in the chat if you do have any questions during. And, you know, if we see them, we can certainly answer them as we go. If not, as Jessica said, there will be a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint. So I know everybody kind of has a different familiarity level here. So the very first thing that we're looking at is what is an ISP? So an ISP, or the individual support plan, it looks at what's most important to an individual with intellectual disabilities or autism. The ISP is developed using a person-centered planning process. It collects information about personal preferences, dreams and wishes, medical history, current medical concerns, and communication preferences. And really, we look at the ISP to capture not just what kind of supports an individual needs to live in everyday life, but also really what is important to the individual.
So some additional information about what exactly an ISP is. We consider it a living and breathing document. So essentially what we're saying there is that, you know, we really try to keep it up to date and reflective of the individual's current desires, wishes, interests, as well as things like diagnoses, medical information, communication needs, and that sort of thing. So it's really meant to not just be a one and done type of experience. It's something that's really meant to continue along with the person and reflect what's going on in their life, in their current life, and also the things that they're striving towards. The Office of Developmental Programs, you'll also hear us say ODP throughout the presentation. It's ODP standardized planning document for individuals. It's designed to meet federal and state guidelines. So there is some information that's captured in the ISP that is required to be present in the document. It follows everyday life principles and considers the life course framework. If you're not familiar with those, that's just fine, because we will be diving a little bit deeper into both of those concepts in coming slides. And as Miranda mentioned, it really addresses not only what's important to the individual, but also what's important for an individual. And it captures that in a variety of different sort of subcategories in the throughout the plan.
So this just talks a little bit about the ISP process. The ISP process is led by the supports coordinator, or the SC. The SC should assist the individual and the family to understand the ISP process. And some of the things that the supports coordinator will look at are relationships that are important to the person, what activities the person likes, what kind of experiences they would like to explore, if they would like to work a competitive job and what kind of job, if there's health and safety risks that should be planned for with the individual's everyday life, what are immediate needs as well as needs that they anticipate for the future, and what type of services that they are looking for, that the individual and family is looking for to help them achieve their goals. And really the first step is to gather those important relationships, to gather that team together, and to discuss all of these things together with the individual and all of those people that they identify as part of their team, and delve into these things all together as a team to explore what does the person want in their life and how do we get there?
So everyday lives, it's essentially a core philosophy and framework that ODP has, and essentially it came out, we have some historical information that's provided here, but essentially a number of stakeholders came together and really tried to evaluate best practices and determine the things that people want in their lives, and the different ways that we can go about improving service delivery and really having people live the life that they want. So the fundamental concept is that with the support of family and friends, individuals with disabilities decide how to live their lives and what supports they need. And basically this takes into account a couple different things. And one is that we value what is important to people with disabilities and their families who are striving to live an everyday life. So when we're talking about the everyday life, we're talking about things like opportunities and relationships, rights and responsibilities, and really being a member of their community, having a valued role in their community, making a contribution to society, and really having their rights respected. And the second fundamental statement involved with everyday lives is that people with disabilities have a right to an everyday life, and a life that's no different than that of other citizens, regardless of whether or not they have a disability.
So this just looks at the principles of everyday lives, and they're all listed on here. And again, these are the same things that we would expect all of us want within our lives. So choice, control, community inclusion, individuals with disabilities should not be segregated from individuals without disabilities. And that's something that we all want for ourselves and our loved ones. We want to be able to collaborate. We want quality in our life, stability, safety, relationships, success, freedom. So these are all the things that we would expect to see in the life of an individual with a disability, just like it is the kinds of things that we want to see in our own lives.
So charting the life course, hopefully some of you have heard about the life course or the life course tools. And basically, when we're referencing the life course, it's a framework that helps people to think about the day-to-day experiences that are part of building an everyday life, while also keeping an eye on future experiences that will move them toward an inclusive and meaningful life in the community. So essentially what we're looking at here is developing expectations for individuals, something to strive for, something that we can use to look at the opportunities and the experiences that we have in our life, and consider what is going to help us get closer to what that vision is. The life course tools, lifecoursestools.com, is something that you can explore. It offers a variety of different tools that you can use to sort of plan for your future. And it's not something that necessarily has to start as early as early childhood. You can really start it wherever you're at, and just plot out what it is that you're hoping to accomplish, your loved one is hoping to accomplish in their life, and also to look at what resources you currently have available to you, to your family, available in your community, and to try to utilize those strengths and those resources that you already have, those opportunities that already exist, or to find out information about other resources that might be available that you're not familiar with, or that you haven't tapped into. And then certainly, if there's any formal services that can be used to help along the way with those opportunities as well. So it's kind of, they're neat in that anybody can use them. It doesn't have to be just an individual with a disability. You can use this in your everyday life, and you can use it wherever you're at in your life stage. It really looks at a bunch of different domains in your life and tries to help you identify, the things that they have, the things that you need, and kind of where you want to go. I think that's, Miranda, did you have anything else for the life course?
The only thing that I would add is if you are active with supports coordination and this is something that your supports coordinator has not talked with you about yet, I would definitely ask them about it. I know that most of the supports coordination organizations are discussing life course framework within the ISP meetings, but some of them aren't quite there yet. So if it's something that you want to learn more about and you've not heard about it yet, definitely ask your supports coordinator, because most of them are, I think they're pretty much all trained on it at this point, and they're pretty eager to share. So certainly reach out.
Definitely.
So let's just talk a little bit more about what you can expect within the ISP. And in each of these sections, there are a number of subsections also. So we didn't list all of those subsections. There's a lot, but there's individual preferences. So that talks about what we like and admire about the individual, their desired activities, what's important to them. There's medical information, so looking at medication, medical appointments, medical contacts, current health status. The health and safety really looks at, there's a number of different domain areas within health and safety. So it looks at things like fire safety, traffic safety, water safety. So there's a lot of different subdomains in each of these. And then the last one is services and support. So that services and support section, I think we talk about it a little bit more in this presentation. But once an individual is enrolled in a waiver, then that services and support section really lists out and defines all of those services and supports that the individual receives and what they need in order to best live their everyday life.
So what additional information is included? Information to ensure that health and safety needs are being met. So it goes back to those important 4 pieces of information that we had referenced in the beginning. What are the types of things that that person needs in their life to ensure that they remain healthy, that they remain safe? So, a lot of that is captured in the medical section, be it medications, health evaluations, medical contacts. There's a section in the ISP, as well as medical history. So important knowing about, the things that maybe have occurred in the past, things to keep in mind and moving forward. Information, there's information about allergies, about immunizations, that sort of thing. And really, what are the things that are important for anybody that's supporting that individual? We take into consideration various risks, and how to go about mitigating those things so that hopefully that, those things don't happen in the future. Any of those key pieces of information that are important for that individual. And as well as information regarding what's important to that individual. So the things that that person wants to achieve and accomplish in their life. So it kind of goes back to that life course and having that vision and those expectations about what that person wants to do with their life and what they want their life to look like. So some of the sections of the ISP that really kind of speak to this are things like the like and admire section. What are the things that you know, the team likes and admires about that person? What are some of the desired activities that that person likes, the things that they like to engage in, the things that maybe they want to engage in the future that they're not quite there yet. And you know, what's important to that individual. There's actually a specific section about that, and what makes sense for that person. So a lot of that is captured in some of those sections, along with, you know, it should certainly tie into that person's goals and outcomes, which I think we touch base on too a little bit later. And then that last bullet point speaks to the fact that information that's in the ISP can also be a part of regulatory compliance, and that different counties may ask for different pieces of information based upon certain compliance related issues or internal policies. So there are certainly some questions or certain pieces of information that you'll see in there. There might be information about, you know, the person's ability to move away from a heat source, or things like having a state ID, things like that might be found in there. Specific pieces of information that the county might be looking for.
Yeah, I chuckled a little bit about that moving away from a heat source, because that is one thing that is very, very specific that we ask for in every single plan. And it is always, most of those like really specific questions are because at one point in time, the state told us we have to document those things in the ISP. So then we just do always moving forward, and counties have a cycle in which the state will come in and do compliance audits. So some of the things that we're asking for in the ISP to make sure that they're documented are because of those compliance audits, that when the state comes in and reviews, you know, they'll review a sampling of support plans, and then we could get basically like some corrective action if they're not up to par per the Office of Developmental Programs. So there are some really specific pieces of information that counties will look for to be included in the ISP. So if, you know, your supports coordinator is asking a question that seems kind of weird, a lot of times that's why. So this just talks about the outcome section of the ISP. The outcomes, this is something that we look at as being really a very important section of the ISP. It should document what the individual really wants to achieve or accomplish over the next year. So the outcome statement should be something that is important to the individual. So what do they want to do? It should not be something that's focused on services or something that is important for them. It should really be, what do they want? So it should be written as, you know, what they want to achieve and why. So for example, I mean, a lot of times we'll see outcomes that say, you know, Johnny goes to the workshop so that he can learn about vocational skills. So that's not something that would be an appropriate outcome, because it's talking about services specifically, and, you know, it really isn't focused, it really isn't focused on why he wants to work or why that's important to him. Outcomes need to be written as a present tense action statement. So this is something that I think a lot of families find to be really strange. So when you're looking at your ISP, it's written as if it's already happening, even if it hasn't happened yet. So for example, if you have somebody who's graduating from high school and they want to work, but they're not working yet, the outcome would still be written as Johnny works, not Johnny wants to work. So that's a little confusing. But then it should also include why Johnny wants to work. So Johnny works so that he can save money to buy things he likes. So it's kind of two parts, what he wants to do and why. And then that outcome action plan, which is the second section in the outcomes section of the ISP, the action plan should focus on what the supports are for the individual to actually achieve their goals. So what's important for that person? So Johnny works, but Johnny really needs somebody to help him understand the job tasks. Johnny needs transportation to and from work. Maybe Johnny needs assistance with communication. Maybe Johnny needs somebody there to supervise him to ensure that all of his health and safety needs are being met throughout the day while he's working. So those are the types of things that would be captured in the outcome action plan. So those are the things that he needs, and then it would also identify specific services that Johnny would need to receive in order to achieve that goal. So, you know, if Johnny wants to work, then maybe Johnny needs employment supports, or maybe Johnny needs transportation, or maybe Johnny needs a companion to be with him all day at work to help him maintain his health and safety needs while he's there. So it's kind of two parts. What does the individual want? And then kind of how do we make that happen, either through paid services or just through maybe some natural supports or other resources to get them there.
So the next thing that we're going to discuss is the supports intensity scale, or you'll hear us refer to it as the SIS assessment. And basically what this is a standardized needs assessment tool designed to measure the pattern and intensity of supports that a person requires. So basically it's a statewide standardized needs assessment tool, you know, that's used by ODP. And it basically looks at different domains in the person's life and, you know, looks at what level of support they need to accomplish certain activities or certain things within those domains. So the specific domains that it really looks at are things like home living, community living, lifelong learning, employment, health and safety, social activity, protection and advocacy, as well as medical and behavioral supports, and asks a whole host of questions. And certainly if you or your loved one have ever sat through a SIS assessment, they can be quite lengthy because it really does capture and cover a lot of different pieces of information and aspects to somebody's life. So they can be very, very lengthy. They are administered by an independent contractor who does them. So it's not somebody who's associated with the county or the provider agency. It's an outside source. And it's administered to individuals who are age 14 or older and who are either an individual with an intellectual disability who's being enrolled in one of the waiver programs. It's also administered to folks who are who have recently registered with the county and have autism without a co-occurring ID diagnosis. So they don't have an intellectual disability, they have autism. They've been determined eligible by the county, and they're going to be receiving support coordination services. And they're 14 years old or older. And these assessments are due every 5 years. So they can occur more frequently than that. If an individual has a major life change, something that's predicted to be ongoing, that has been ongoing for at least 6 months, they can have an additional SIS assessment completed so that it's accurate and it reflects the things that are going on in that individual's life and what that person needs are at this time. And basically it's used to receive services and ensure that services can meet the needs of the individual. So SIS assessments, the results are shared with the team, including the family members, and the information and the results that are generated out of that assessment are used in the service listings, are tied to the service listings that will ultimately appear in that person's plan. And without getting into the mud too much on that. I think I'll kind of leave that general, but essentially it does go hand in hand with the services that the person has.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I would add to this, and this just came up recently, I had a conversation with a school social worker who said that this was the first year ever that families had invited her to assist, but 3 separate families had invited her to participate in the SIS assessment. And they were all families of individuals who are graduating high school and being enrolled in a waiver for the first time. So it was their first time experiencing the SIS assessment, and they're individuals with some pretty significant needs. And she just mentioned that it was really kind of taxing for the family to discuss these meetings can take a while. So to discuss for a few hours about all of the things that their family member needs assistance with. So I just, want to caution anybody who's on here that may not have participated in a SIS assessment yet. It is not a strengths-based assessment. It really is a needs-based assessment. So the purpose of the SIS assessment is really to identify every need and every risk that is involved with that individual's life so that it can be captured and that anybody that's supporting that individual would really be able to have a full understanding of what their support needs are. So we do understand and we appreciate that it can be a really difficult meeting to have for your loved one, but it really is necessary to ensure that all of the support needs are captured in their ISP. So I know one of the things that we were asked to talk about was how does the ISP change when a person is enrolled in a waiver? So there are a couple ways that the ISP changes when a person's enrolled in a waiver. One of the main changes is for a person with an intellectual disability, the SIS information is added to the ISP. So if an individual is enrolled as somebody with autism without an intellectual disability, they would already have a SIS upon intake with the county. So that information would already be in their ISP. But for most of our participants who have an intellectual disability, they've not yet had a SIS. So they will have the SIS right before their waiver enrollment, and that information will be included then in the ISP. Some of the other things is that the waiver funded providers' roles and responsibilities are also added to the plan. So, we talked about the outcome action section where, that really identifies how the person's services and supports will help them meet their goals. So the waiver provider's role in meeting the individual's goals is added to that part. But there are some other sections in the plan too where there's information added as far as, like what kind of staffing the provider is going to be providing to the individual, like the supervision levels and that sort of thing. The information is added to the outcomes to indicate how the service will assist the individual in achieving their goals. And really importantly, it identifies the frequency and the duration of the service that will be provided. So how often will the person be receiving the service and how long? So that has to be spelled out very, very clearly in the outcome action section of the ISP. And then the services are also added to the service detail section of the ISP. And that is actually how providers bill for their services. So all billing is done electronically. So the service has to be authorized in the service details of the ISP in order for a waiver provider to be able to actually bill for those services.
So a little bit more about the service details. When you're looking at that section, services are listed by unit. So when your loved one is receiving services, you'll hear your supports coordinator talk about units, increasing units, or how many units they need. And what they're really talking about typically is the amount let me back up for a second. Most services have 15-minute unit equivalent. So essentially when we're talking about an hour of service, we're talking about 4 units. So if that person is, you know, attending a service for, you know, an hour a day, 5 days a week, you're looking at 20 units for that one day. So, you know, some services are stray from that a little bit. So 24-hour respite, for example, is going to be one of those. So a unit is equivalent to a day. So you know, you're going to see some different variations in the service details sections. And I think, Miranda, you kind of touched on this in the previous slide too, is that services must be authorized in the plan for a provider to bill. So it's really important anytime you're talking about, you know, the services that you get together with the team and discuss what the individual's needs are, talk about what that service provision is going to look like, and give enough time for that information to be put into the plan, approved by the county, and also then to, you know, allow time for any revisions that need to be made to that plan and approved so that the services can start and the provider can then go ahead and bill for those services. So just a little bit more information about kind of what those things look like when they're in that section.
So how are services actually authorized? When a waiver recipient's team identifies an unmet need, a team meeting occurs. I did see on the registration sheet, somebody had asked, does a meeting have to occur every time there's a change requested? So yes, there always has to be a team meeting. Does that meeting always have to be face-to-face? Not necessarily. There are certain provisions right now because of the pandemic where, I mean, most meetings are not happening face-to-face. And depending on the situation, even during non-pandemic times, would really depend on whether or not like a full team meeting would need to occur, or if it could just be, you know, a phone call making a request. We've certainly authorized services where a family made a phone call saying, hey, you know, we have a family member in the hospital. I really need emergency respite right now. Can I get a week of respite? And I mean, we've certainly authorized that kind of thing without having a full team meeting. So, I mean, really, it's kind of case by case. I can't say that there always needs to be a team meeting, but there's definitely situations in where a team meeting would need to occur prior to an authorization decision. So if the team is in agreement, and this is why the team meeting is important, because the whole team needs to be in agreement that a change in services is needed. So if the team is in agreement that the service change is appropriate, then the supports coordinator would document that change in need in the service note and would submit a critical revision to the administrative entity. The administrative entity reviews the critical revision, the service notes, and any other necessary documentation to determine if the service can be approved. So we always recommend that when you're looking at starting a new service, again, unless it's an emergency, we know emergencies happen and we can't prevent that. But if you're looking at starting a new service, that typically the turnaround time for authorization decisions, you should look at least 3 weeks out. And that's because there are specified timeframes. The supports coordinator has a week to enter the critical revision, and then the administrative entity has 2 weeks to make an authorization decision. So that 3 weeks gives that, you know, 1 week for plan revision and then the 2 week for review. And a lot of times the plan can be reviewed more quickly than that, but that is a very fair amount of time when looking at making a service change in an individual support plan.
Okay, so what does an AE look for when reviewing a service request? One of the things that we take a look at is if there's justification of the need. So if somebody is requesting a specific service, why is that service beneficial for that person? What is it that that person is hoping to accomplish or work on? Related to their disability or their interest or their goals. Why is it that that's a need for that person? Also, does the request comply with the service definition? So there is a document called the ISP manual. It is a lengthy document, I think to the tune of like 250 pages or something along those lines. And it lists, among other pieces of information, service definition. So it's the information about all the specific services that are kind of under the ODP umbrella, and provides a lot of information about what exactly that service is, some information about what that service isn't, and some basically rules and regulations about that service and the way the service provision. Does the individual's budget allow for the change? So there are different funding streams, different waivers that individuals can receive. Aside from base funding, which is county funding, the three major waiver programs that we have within our system are the person family waiver, the PFDS waiver. That waiver has a $33,000 cap. So that's per fiscal year. So services tied to that plan, the total amount for those services wouldn't be able to exceed $33,000, with the exception of if you have employment services. You can go $15,000 beyond that $33,000 cap if you have those employment services as a part of that ISP. Our kind of mid-tier waiver that we have is the community living waiver. It's the newest waiver actually that we have as a part of our system, and it has a $70,000 cap to that one. And then there's the consolidated waiver, which does not have a cap limit per fiscal year. So essentially you're just looking at somebody's budget can dictate a bit of perhaps the amount of service that that person can receive because of the budget that they have allotted. Is there a provider willing and qualified for this service? So whether it's being paid via base funding, counties have contracts with certain provider agencies to provide certain services, so that might be looked at. Otherwise, you're looking at other agencies. Every agency that provides services has to be qualified to provide that service with the Office of Developmental Programs in order for that service to be attached to the ISP and provided to that individual. So, we'd be looking to make sure that the provider agency that's looking to provide those services and supports is qualified to do so. And then another thing that we'd be looking at is, are there other payers that should be exhausted first? Are there other means of funding that could be utilized? So our waivers are the payer of last resort. So if there are other funding streams such as insurance or OVR or certain services provided by school districts that can be utilized first, then those options need to be explored. So a lot of times you'll people might refer to some of our formal waivers as waivers that that are adult waivers. And part of what goes into that is because individuals up to the age of 21 really have other systems and funding streams that can be utilized for certain services and supports along the way. So, you know, prior to age 21, you have some other options for certain things. And those other options need to be explored before we could assist with any of those things. So that's another one that we look at as well.
When is an ISP updated? So an ISP should be updated whenever there is a change. And there are a couple of different types of ISP revisions. There's the plan creation, which technically is not a revision. It is when the plan is initially created, when an individual first comes into supports coordination. There's a general update. So a general update literally is exactly what it sounds like. It's just any kind of update. So if a supports coordinator does a monitoring with an individual and their family, and you know, they had some med changes, then the supports coordinator would do a general update just to update that kind of information. There's an annual review update, which is a big meeting that you have once a year with your supports coordinator and any other members of the team, and really go through kind of everything in the plan or anything that really would have significantly changed in the past year. Should all be updated during the annual review update. Typically, that's also a time that the supports coordinator will review other stuff that needs to be reviewed annually, like maybe if the individual is on the PUNS list, or they might go over some of that life course framework that we talked about earlier. So that's really kind of your big annual meeting. The fiscal year rollover, that's something that families don't really see as much of, but that supports coordinators and counties work on together. But this time of year, it's kind of madness at my office, and I'm sure Desiree, yours as well, and the supports coordinators, because all of the ISPs have to be what's called rolled over for the next fiscal year, which starts July 1. So for people who do not have any funded services in their ISP, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is kind of change the dates for next year. But for people who have funded services, then it means ensuring that all of the services are reflected accurately in the plan, and a lot of other stuff. And right now it's really kind of crazy because during the pandemic, most people have not been receiving the services that they typically would, and are just starting to return to some of their old services now. So trying to plan for what those services are going to look like come July has been challenging. But that's not something that families typically have to worry about unless you know that there's some major changes coming in the new fiscal year. The critical revision is the one that families probably would think about the most, or you know, you might not know that it's called a critical revision, but that's when there's a service change. So if you have somebody in your family who is receiving waiver funded services, the critical revision is the plan that's completed anytime you request an increase in services, a decrease in services, a change in services, a change in providers of a service. The supports coordinator would complete a critical revision, and that critical revision essentially acts as the service request for any changes in services.
Thank you both again so much for that presentation.